Drow Ranger. You ever heard of her? Yeah, it turns out she was like really popular last patch. Yeah, crazy, right? It must have been happening on all those other servers. A kid, I mean, everyone who played Dota in 721 played against Drow, and over the course of the game learned to hate her. And then the next game Drow was on their team and ended up being terrible, and then they learned to hate her even more, but for completely different reasons. Drow Range was quite good. A successful marksmanship proc would kill a creep in one hit. Even in Ancient, it also went straight through armor and basically dealt pure damage. So obviously the two things that got nerfed about her this update was that marksmanship doesn't kill Ancients, and marksmanship now only pierces base armor, as in armor that you start off with, and armor from the agility stats. So Morphling hates her. That axe stacking 6 Shiva's guards? Arguably less so. Still, I hesitate to say this has ruined her. She's still got an above 50% win rate and appears in the 5th most amount of games of any hero in Dota. But you already knew that. She was in your last game. But really, this wasn't even really a nerf to Drow as much as it was a huge buff to Timbersaw. We'll talk about him later, but before that, there's Grimstroke. And a complete reversal of Dark Willow's fate, Grimstroke actually got buffed due to the changes that were made around his Scepter upgrade. So basically, Grimstroke had this insane Ags upgrade, which, spoiler alert, puts him way up in the upper echelon of Ags holders, and just as a basic introduction, lets you essentially get Morphling's really old Replicate ultimate, except way better. Upon casting on an enemy, you spawn an illusion of that enemy. Pretty meh so far, right? But then you realize that it's completely magic immune. Has 30% more movement speed than the original, takes 200% as much damage, but holy shit, deals 150% of the original's damage. And illusions can crit, and they can lifesteal, and you can cast this every 35 seconds. 150% of that PA with the Divine Rapier and 500 damage means that you are going to be swinging at her for 750 damage. And it's constantly BKB'd. Constantly. How are you supposed to clear that which is constantly BKB'd? Unfortunately, because of the BKB thing, Grimstroke can't actually cast Inkswell on it, the spell that gives movement speed damage and then explodes in a massive stunning blast, except, oh wait, in 722 you absolutely can. And that's without needing eggs. That's what I mean, right? This was given to Grimstroke in order to have him have more synergy between him and his eggs, but it also pairs up with just BKBs in general. It's pretty good. In fact, it might actually enable Grimstroke himself to get BKB and then be an unstoppable 3.7 AoE stun. We don't really need Ags, but it might be good because in 722B they made the Ags illusion take 350% extra damage rather than 200% extra damage, and then lowered its duration from 20 to 15. But I mean, that was a given. You know what they didn't touch? Inkswell.
I see this as an absolute win.
Oh, look at that. Gyrocups is still in the game, chugging along. You go, Gyro. Keep it up, man. He's got a little extra attack speed. Good for him. Invoker is a little better overall. That's good to see. For the last wee while, I've been making an Invoker guide that goes through Quas Wex and Quas Exort builds, as well as everything in between. The first thing that I did when 722 came out was Control F Invoker, and then of course I Controlled F Oracle right afterwards. Both are pretty alright so far. Invoker in particular is nearly completely unchanged. He's lost 1 point in Exort, which translates to 3 points when he has 3 orbs. But those 3 points have just been added to Invoker as a base. In reality, pure Exort Invoker is the exact same, but all other Invoker builds are ever so slightly better.
I see this as an absolute win.
You know, I should probably stop playing this clip considering it's clearly from a pirated copy of Avengers Endgame, and Disney have highly skilled assassins on their payroll. I had to change my name to Eric Wrong for a while after I did that Cobalt Blues video that was a reference to Ratatouille and the one that I played in the earlier part. Scary days, man. I mean, Disney, if you are watching right now, I didn't pirate Avengers. I bought a ticket like a good little boy. Also, Endgame sucked and... Oh, sec, there's someone at the door. Sorry about that. Oh my god. I was visited by a traveling firecracker salesman. Nice guy. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. Invoker's pretty good. You should play him. Io and Mars were added to Captain's Mode. ESL Birmingham is going to be mighty interesting. Io in general pairs up well with heroes in the pub game meta, and whenever Io is added to Captain's Mode or removed from Captain's Mode, the entire meta shifts around it. More than any other hero in Dota, Io has the most defined line between a meta in which he can be picked and a meta in which he can't. When Io is available, you either have to waste a ban on him, which, I mean, happens a lot. He held the record multiple times over the last few times he was in Captain's Mode for most frequently first banned hero, and even when you're not banning him, you're banning all of the heroes around him. If an Io gets first picked, your immediate reaction is to remove the heroes that pair up well with him. Drow was a big one. Chaos Knight, Gyrocopter, all the classics. Even without really any discernible buffs or nerfs for Io in 722, you could totally be right in guessing that Io being added to Captain's Mode changes the meta the most out of everything in this update. And Mars is also here, I guess. I mean, he's just a generally good hero that doesn't really have any glaring flaws. Well, actually, there is this one flaw now that I think about it. He's powerless when he's out of mana. I wonder who could burn that mana from him. Keeper of the Light is back. It was a bit touch and go for a while there. In 720, Mana Leak was sadly taken away from us when Keeper was given his whole Ignis, Fatus, Will of the Wisp ulti thing, but now it's back, just under a new name. Chakra Magic, a spell that managed to survive the massacre of 720, has decided to don his old buddy's abilities and double up as it. When cast on allies, Chakra Magic, of course, still does the exact same thing it's done for a while now, restoring mana and also reducing cooldowns on all of an ally's spells that were currently on cooldown. But when cast on enemies, it drains 5.5% of that enemy's current mana for every 100 units that enemy moves, which is kind of different. Mana Leak did 5% of max mana, which meant that it was totally possible to leak out all mana, hit 0, and then get stunned. Unfortunately, but understandably for balance reasons, this doesn't actually have a stun, and only lasts 4 seconds instead of 7, but, I mean, dude, it makes up for it by basically being 2 spells for the price of 1, and also not costing any mana. Because it's Chakra Magic, right? Chakra Magic doesn't cost mana. That's about 160 less than Mana Leak used to cost. Keeper is a keeper. You better watch out, Mars players. Then there's Lich, who has a 0.75 base mana regen. I mean, good for him, right? He's still missing Sacrifice, so that's a problem, but actually, let's work this out, because maybe he's not anymore. Sacrifice at level 1 had a cooldown of 60 seconds, which is perfect for our calculations, and then converted 55% of a creep's current HP as mana. So let's say that we use it on a melee creep every 1 minute. That's 55% of 550 health, which comes down to 302.5 mana. Okay, yeah, this is the first step, and I don't really think Lich's extra mana regen stands a chance, but we'll complete it anyway, right? So 0.5 mana regen comes to a whopping 45 mana regen a minute. Yeah, nah, this won't do. Bring back Sacrifice. And in fact, here's a good question. Why did Lich even get this in the game if it's a 45 mana regen a minute increase? What's the point? But then there's poor Lion being punished because he's too good of a mid hero. Oh, sorry, did I say something shocking? Lion's been a great mid ever since they gave him the thing where for every Finger of Death kill he gets a bonus on every other Finger of Death kill after it. Naturally, given that scaling aspect, getting him to level 6 and killing with Finger of Death is of utmost priority. Plus, he's always kind of been a good mid. The only reason you didn't see him play there is because while he can win the lane, he didn't really do much with the farm. But that's all changed now, because that guy farms for eggs. If rushing to level 6 was so important because it allowed you to have one Finger of Death with which to kill people and start the stack, getting eggs is the most important thing you'll ever do. Not only does it mean more kills for Finger of Death stacks, it also means that you get more kills with the Finger of Death stacks. Even in 722, with the nerf to Finger of Death's extra damage per count of 50 to 40, mid and Ags Lion is still the absolute best way to play him. Looking forward to seeing it at TI9. But beyond that, there's Lycan, who I'm going to be bold here and say that no one will see at TI9, especially as he is right now. Dude. I'm convinced that Ice Frog was on a deadline the day of 722 and needed to really quickly come up with an Ags upgrade for Lycan, Terrorblade, and Troll Warlord before he could call it a day and go home. I mean, it would have looked pretty awkward if 722 came out saying, hey, check it out, absolutely every hero in the game has an Ags upgrade, except for Lycan, Troll, and Terrorblade. So in the 11th hour, Ice Frog just vomited out 3 seemingly useful Ags upgrades that look fine until you actually read them. Lycan's one is that for every single wave that comes out, one of the lane's waves spawns 2 wolves. That's it. You can't control the wolves, you can't move the wolves, you are in fact literally just spawning more creeps per wave. And that's what the enemy would want in the late game, isn't it? People want more creeps per wave. More creeps per wave means more last hits per wave. It means more money per wave. This is the shittiest Ags upgrade they've ever added. Unless you're on the other team. In fact, liking players on the enemy team, Ags is the best item ever. You should keep going it. 10 out of 10, Ice Frog. I can see why you're a millionaire. We already talked about Mars, but because we're in the M's, I maybe want to just finish off with them, right? Mars is in Captain's mode. Awesome. He was pretty balanced beforehand and didn't really need to be nerfed to get into Captain's mode, but just to be on the safe side, Ice Frog tweaked a few things. Shouldn't really matter too much, but what I am excited about is seeing just how Mars is played now that he is pickable in pro games. This time next month, we might be looking at Mars in a completely different way. I mean, who knows, right? Maybe he turns into the hardest of carriers or finds a niche as a position 5 roamer. Who knows? But then there's Medusa, who is a bit more concerning. I'm even concerned about her. And I'm a Medusa fan, so my perspective is as someone playing the Medusa. And even as a person benefiting from her talents, even I am kind of sickened by the fact that Medusa has the absolute most soul-crushing talent in the game. And it's available at level 15. Okay, so here. Medusa has a slight nerf to her Mystic Snake extra mana spell talent. It's dropped from an extra 30% to an extra 25%. But that's still 25% on top of the default 20% mana steal. Every 7 seconds, you can steal 45% of any hero's maximum mana pool. That's insane, dude. Cast it on Mars, he's out of the game. Cast it on Storm Spirit, he's out of the game. Cast it on a Silencer with 500,000 stacks of insteel. Well, you've just nabbed yourself about a 10 trillion mana for your own mana pool, which, need I remind you, is essentially your health pool when you're playing as Medusa. This meta seems to be shaping up as one that takes a little longer to get going, and when games start going longer, Medusa starts growing stronger. But silver lining, maybe this is so egregious that potentially Medusa players actually just feel so guilty, they instead go and pick something else. Who am I kidding? Dota people aren't like that. Shit, dude, a Dota player would go out and murder you if he heard that that would guarantee him MMR, so, hey, I don't know. Player and win dirty games, or don't lose because that less honourable guy on the enemy team picked her. Quite the conundrum.